All right, ladies and gentlemen, next we are going to see that effectiveness in action with a campaign that turned awareness into shared vision for a healthier future. Let's watch our first Smarties Spotlight on Smarties Vietnam 2025 Best in Show campaign, Thank You from Your Future Self by MSD Vietnam and Mulin Love Mishra.
For the first time in Vietnam, a vaccine brand broke every record, becoming the #1 selling pharma brand, without ever saying the word vaccine. In a country where sexual health remains a social taboo, HPV-related cervical cancer kills 3,200 women annually. 15 years of education, yet vaccination coverage is below 6%. The real barrier wasn't knowledge, it was timing. And when the timing did not feel right, they do not act. So we reframed the conversation to the right time is now. Our idea was simple but powerful. Let her future self become the messenger. A thank you from your future self. 3 lives, 3 aspirations, 1 invisible threat. A single decision today to ensure lifetime protection. The campaign message illuminating screens and billboards to bring the HPV prevention message to millions. KOLs and social media influencers. Doctors on VTV Allo Doctor and creators from Via Cetera's Kong Tsuang Show shared stories, debunk myths, and drive urgency. With Vietnam's first AI-powered HPV prevention experience exhibition, we took prevention to the people. The HPV Risk Control Alliance organized 50 scientific seminars, reaching over 10,000 doctors. The result? 8 times microsite traffic, 39% increase in positive opinion to vaccinate, a beginning of a long-term endeavor towards an HPV-free future, where we all say, thank you from your future self.
Isn't it incredible and truly remarkable how creativity is really driving real behavior change? And have you ever wondered what separates a winning campaign from the rest? And what is the X factor that transforms a great idea into Smartie winners? And to find out, we are going inside the jury room to hear directly from Smartie's Vietnam main jury and debate the benchmark of excellence. And please join me in welcoming our moderator, Mr. Phil Worthington, former Senior Client Director, Tonula, and esteemed panelists to the stage, Mr. Mohinder Jakar, Marketing Director, Vietnam and Cambodia, Pernod Ricard, Mr. Samir Yadav, Director, Marketing Strategy, Southeast Asia, Mondelez Gendo, and Ms. Nguyễn Thị Ngọc Linh, Head of Growth and Marketing of FE Credit. Once again, please, our moderator and panelists, welcome to the stage.
Morning, everybody. Even though we've introduced the names of the esteemed panelists, I'll just ask them to talk for 20 seconds each, or possibly 30 seconds, just to introduce themselves a little bit beyond their name and their job title.
Samir Yadav, Marketing, Mondelez.
Perfect. Linh Nguyen, Head of Growth.
I said you
FE
can miss
Credit.
that bit out. They've already gone through name and job title.
I take care of Southeast Asia marketing strategy and new business development for Southeast Asia. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linh. I'm Head of Digital Business and Crowd Marketing in FE Credit. So it has been, I almost have 3 years in the juries, and I hope that today with all the gentlemen here, I can give you at least a sense about how to have an effective submission for this year.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is already there. I won't repeat that. I've been with Pernod Ricard for more than 15 years now. So in short, I'm the person you need to come to if you want to have a good time in Ho Chi Minh. As I was joking with somebody yesterday that I don't know the names of places in Ho Chi Minh, but I know all the bars. So
Right, just myself. I mean, I'm the moderator today's discussion. Just simply out of the fact that I've been in the jury room of Smarties probably for all but 1 year over the last 12 years. So I'm in a little bit of a unique position to understand what are they actually talking about, all these senior marketeers, when it comes to deciding what is the most effective campaign of the year with the most impact of all those that were submitted. And just a couple of points. I don't want to talk too much, but just by way of introduction. One of the things that I observed, particularly this year compared to previous years, is that generally a lot of campaigns in previous years have rigorous targeting of Gen Z. Like very few campaigns didn't target Gen Z. This year, a lot of successful campaigns, targeted someone else except for Gen Z. And also, the other thing I observed on previous years is that a lot of campaigns were a little bit formulaic, where it's like, okay, we're going to target Gen Z. It needs to have some dancing and needs to feature a music video. And generally, I kind of call that out during Smarties' summary last year or the year before. And what we saw is that there were a lot fewer successful campaigns that kind of conform to this level of to this formula. We saw a lot more creativity, a lot more innovation, a lot more campaigns based on insight and human understanding, and a lot more that disrupted the status quo. Interestingly, I'm not too sure why, we've always had lots and lots of winners that featured tech. This year we didn't. Only a few winners featured tech during 2025 compared to previous years. Anyway, that's enough about me. You want to get the opinions of the senior marketeers, the ones who actually developed these campaigns. So just to start off, to warm them up a little bit, just want to talk a little bit about what it was like in the actual jury room itself. What was the atmosphere like? What kind of discussion happen? Was it animated? Did anybody have different opinions? Just generally, just to warm us up. Who wants to go first? Lynn, you're being volunteered.
So, all of us have about 2 weeks before the jury days that we can open on the entry and we have our review. But it doesn't make the jury days become more simple or easier with us. Because the moment when I enter the room, so no matter that I already have a well preparation, a lot of point of views about how I can evaluate on the entries, but still a lot of discussion, agreement, disagreement happen in the room. At the end of the day, I bring with myself a lot of excitement, being inspired, being surprised, and truly immersed in the way that the creativity that you are bringing over the years. So that's about the way that the jury days, 8 hours, we were there to justify on the entry.
Like in every classroom, there are three types of students. One who are very studious, one who will say, okay, let me see on the exam day what will happen. So the jury is also like that. I always get baffled when I enter the room and then somebody is saying, did you see that case number 32? Very impressed with them, I'm going for it. And I'm thinking in my mind, I didn't even read through it. So the first thing that, I keep telling myself that if I have not read the case, then let me not speak or at least abstain. So yeah, the discussions have been very interesting. Lot of pulls, lot of pushes. And I must say that, the thinking has been very deep, when people go into each and every case. So a very, very interesting learning experience for me.
I think I would second that, and the fact that there is a diversity in the jury, and that always helps because we have, let's say, expats, we have locals, and there's always a different perspective that comes. Sometimes, as an outsider, I can look at the creativity or the data, but I sometimes lack the local context, and that's the reason why sometimes I come with a particular point of view or a scoring for a campaign, and then when talking to the people in the room, we change our point of view. And I think that's the biggest thing, that we are all open to changing our perspective and learning something new over there. And I think that's for me, the defining point of the jury exercise, that everyone comes having their favorites or something that I really feel about, and then you convince and you talk to other people, and then you have a discussion. So it's quite open and transparent in that sense.
Um, uh, was there any examples when you're having discussions about a particular category whereby the decision was quite tough? Maybe it was a close call, maybe there's a split jury. Can you just like recall any examples of that during your experience in the jury room?
I mean, I won't take the name of the brands, but there have been many such instances um, wherein, see, at the end of the day, jury also is a consumer, and then you're also judging. So sometimes when you look at the case, there could be a viewpoint that can come in, or you might have a view on how it is being executed. I would say that there have been multiple cases where we had to finally settle down that okay, we will agree to disagree and then move on. I won't take specific brand names, but there have been instances when people have cited that this particular execution was done last year by this other brand, for example. But this brand has taken a different call. For one of our brands itself in Mondelez, there was a very interesting discussion which happened that you guys have started this particular platform, but are you serious about it? And would you continue to do over it over a period of years? So there are these questions, but I mean, I don't have top of the mind any particular brand. I don't know, Lynn or Mohinder, if you might.
No, I remember the last year when I'm in a jury room, and I take a lot of consideration myself between two approach. The first approach is not new, but it's have time and it's already proved that that's very much effective with the business. In the second approach is very bold, very creative, but because it's new, so it don't have enough time in order to deliver the result. So standing between both is a very tough decision that what should be the best case to show to the market. So at the end, I remember that we all joined together and we make the decision that we need to take not just about how the approach look like, but how about the potential to scale and about the sustainable growth that that case can build not only for for that own brand, but also for the market benchmark. So that is the decision that I used to make last year, and it's not easy, to be honest.
I don't know how many in the room have watched the movie 12 Angry Men, but it's a very good parable of how a jury works, because sometimes one faithful one person who's convinced on something can convince the entire jury on something. But I think it all boils down to fact. Because a lot of times, as Samir said, sometimes we don't have the time to go through each and every case in detail. So we look through the facts, we look through the videos, and we make a judgment call. But somebody who understands it well, and it's happened, I think, 2-3 times with me, where in one case it was me, and in a couple of cases it was other people, but we really liked what we saw and what the data showed us. And therefore, we were able to convince the rest of the jury to look at the data and then, understand the real campaign. And as Samir said, sometimes people get lost in questions which are not relevant to the measurement itself. Because we are here to judge a campaign. We are not here to look at the long-term strategy or whether somebody did it in the past. Because we look at the campaign, what it achieved, what was the objective, and did it work or not. And that's what we are here for. So I think it all boils down to going back to the data.
Okay, I'm just going to move on to what I think is probably the most relevant question now. I just want to ask the panel members about what they think makes an entry into Smarties. What made it truly stand out? What made them think that this is worthy of being a gold winner compared to others? The actual jury members, they weren't exposed to every single category. To make the discussion more focused, each jury was exposed to a limited number of different categories, which made the conversation much more interesting and animated. I just want to point out that you don't need to be shy. You can, in this next section, you can actually mention brands and campaigns that you particularly like. But if you just focus on what made them stand out on your behalf? We're going left to right again. Somebody wants to go
Okay,
first?
I can go in. See, MMA has a very clear direction. For example, 20% weightage on your strategy, 20% on creativity, then 20 on execution, and 40 on results. So there is a particular format. But particularly for me, when the consumer problem, I mean the first section, which is strategy, when the consumer problem is very clear and put in a very simple way that is understandable to a 6-year-old kid, that's, for me, starts to break the bank. And to be fair, it happens that maybe sometimes creative execution of it might not be, up to the mark to a very clear problem they have started. But being clear of what the consumer tension is, what the insight is very, 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 very important, at least for me. And I have sometimes seen that people get lost in a lot of writing in English and AI, generating comments. But it could be a very simple statement that lands the tension. Yeah. So that's at least for me.
That is true. Let me tell you. So because I have 3 years as a tourist, and year over the years, I see that some submission when you give to us. So, first of all, you don't need to be a big brand to submit to the MMA. That's the first thing. Sometimes, for each of you, when you run your campaign, the root cause is so different. But you base on the root cause, and then you tell us the story about how you solve the problem. That is so much important. That's not about good English. That's about how you can make your idea and how you can prove that your idea works. I, I remember that I used to see some very nice, very impressive submission, and I believe that you have to spend a lot of effort to do that. It just look like one music videos, to be honest, and it's very much impressed. But at the end, after that impression, what I really want to see is like, how is work? How is work with you? How you can unify all of your marketing unit as one and run a campaign, build the engine, and make the impact. So it's very important. And one tips that I need to say is like, follow the template. Most of the submissions, sometimes when you submit to MMA, you try to talk, you try to prove, but then in only some simple word, that's already work. You don't have to put a lot of work in there. Just put your real word there with the impact, with the measurement. And the last thing is about the performance. I still remember that we keep talking with each other in the room, that when we talk about the performance, they know more about how many impression, how many reach, how many download. No, we don't look at that number, because that number is so impressed. But at the end, how about the ROI? How about the MAU? How about the active customer? How about the return? How about the retention rate? How about your campaign after all, you have a better score, better brand score. So that is something important. So just bring that on to your submission. That's enough. That's very much enough.
I think I agree with both Samir and Lynn. The key fact is that I was discussing with Lynn in the morning, and we were agreeing on something, that sometimes marketing thinks that we exist in isolation. We are there just for the sake of creativity, but ultimately we are serving a business purpose. So the most important thing is that, are we solving a business problem, and how effectively are we solving that? And I think that's the biggest criteria to judge a marketing campaign. So how effectively are you describing the challenge that the brand was facing? What was done to address the challenge, and then what was the outcome? I think these are the three things that we look at. And then obviously the creativity, the approach that you took to do that is always the icing on the cake. So, that always adds up. But the basic fact is that, did we identify the problem correctly, and did we address the problem correctly? And sometimes I think I would like highlight something, that sometimes we feel that there are people who submit something in a category, and as a jury, when we look at this, it could have been very good entry in that category, but maybe it doesn't work here. So also, we focus on our consumers and our challenges. You should also focus on which category are you targeting, because sometimes we take a spray approach, that I will put something everywhere. So, be focused on what exactly were we trying to do this in this campaign, and where did we make the most impact, and then focus on that.
And just building on this point, please don't be lazy. I'm into all the marketing folks here and brand managers. Don't be lazy, and more is not important. It is not about quantity. So if I take a hypothetical category, beer for hair care, beer for hair care, innovation excellence, beer for hair care, creative excellence, beer for hair care, digital commerce. How is it possible that the same case with same things written and same execution is going in every category? So if there is a pressure on you from your marketing head, and I mean that you have to put 30 cases, I mean I don't think it's worth it. No need to do that.
Just to finish on from that particular question, one thing that I observed as well is that very often there were categories that you associate with being very, very rational in the way that consumers go about buying them, and they took on a quite unique, different kind of emotional approach to it. And I found that the jury members responded extremely positively towards those kind of campaigns. So an element of disrupting the status quo was something that was very prevalent for me in terms of what did well in terms of the Smarties. Just as a small aside, the previous year, I only counted one winner that used AI in 2024. Last year, more than half of the winners featured some element of the new technology. So that was also quite an interesting trend that I observed. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next question for the panelists. And that is like, but based on their experience about what they learned in the jury room, could they give one example of where they've taken something, some experience out of Smarties, maybe some characteristic from a campaign you particularly liked, and employed it within your own organization?
Okay, I'll start with this one, because 2 years ago I moved to Vietnam, and in my first year I became a jury member on Smarties. And the first thing I did after looking at all the campaigns was walk out to my team. You told me this cannot happen in Vietnam. So I think the biggest thing is that what we all see and take out is the creativity and sometimes the unique approach. And then I take it as a positive input in saying that, okay, this is something we can push for, or we can try, because unlike, let's say, regular consumer categories, I come from alcohol, so we have a lot of restrictions on what we cannot do, or who we can target. So therefore, it's always a challenge for us to walk between the lines and still be creative. So for me, looking at the work in the jury room, I also get inspiration, and then I share with my teams that, can we have a look at that, and can we get inspired by these things?
I don't know that how many of you here have time to open the MMA Smartie on the submission, on the winners, and have the reviews. Because if you have time, so please just give some time in your daily work and review that one. So I think that I'm not just only about the jury, I'm also one marketer. And I also learn a lot from that one. So that's why, first of all, I encourage you to do that. So when you do that, so there are two things. One, you will feel so much proud to be in marketing, because that gives you a lot of sense about how you can make everything so different. It's not just about how you invest, how about you spend the budget, how about you shape your campaign, how about the creative, but that's about how you do everything as one and build the impact. So that's the first thing that I also want you to, same like me, just review that one before you start any campaign. I'm sure you have a lot of things to learn. Because I come from finance, most of the people think that finance marketing is so boring, because all is about the number, right? All about the disbursement, active customer for sure. But what I learned from the MMA is like, for me, not, I don't know for others, but for me, that's about 70% and 30%. 70% is every time when I run the campaign, I use my experience. I use my understanding, my insight, whatever I have during the time when I'm in my company. I know my customer and I implement the campaign. That is my 70%. But the 30% is where you have to learn. You have to learn not just in your own industry, but in other industry what they are doing. So if you have like the AI, so how you can apply the AI for another industry, but then banking cannot, we can do it, right? So that is my 30%. That's the way that every time when I go out of the jury room, I always talk with my team that we always can do something different. And maybe, I don't know, but sometimes we fail. But at least we learn from that one. And we know that next time how we can make it better. So that's why, not just us, you also, just open and you will feel so much proud, trust me. And it gives you a lot of energy to be a marketing.
I think we are on time, so I can skip.
No, you've got 1 minute, Samir. You're not getting out of this one.
No, no. I, first thing, I mean, I feel very inspired, but also sometimes jealous that why can't we think of this idea when I see a lot of the ideas by other brands. But if I have to give one example, very impressed with the way banking, insurance sector are looking at data. You know, it feels as if the CPG companies know how to do this best. But if I have to take one example, I think Vietnam Airlines did something very wonderful with the data they had in terms of increasing the value of the consumer over the life cycle. And there were some very interesting cases from them. So I think, yeah, it was a very good example for me personally.
All right, that brings the discussion about Smarties 2025 to an end. So make sure that you put in an entry for, or hopefully with enthusiasm, to put in an entry for the submissions for 2026. So thank you very much to the panelists.
So I get the key takeaway is don't be lazy, smart for the Smarties. Is that right? Thank you so much to our moderators. Thank you to our panelists. A bigger round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so please one step forward so that we can give you our token of appreciation for your time, for your insights, and for your contribution to today's event. Thank you to Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you to our moderators. Thank you to the panelists. Please, you can come back to your seats.